The morning felt off from the start. The sunlight that usually spilled through the curtains seemed colder, the silence heavier. Helen checked the clock. 8:15. They were never this late. She poured another cup of coffee, pretending she wasn't counting the seconds between glances at the window. She tried texting once. "Everything all right?" Then again, 20 minutes later. "Are you on your way?" The messages stayed marked as delivered, never read. The phone lay face down on the table, its screen black and indifferent. Outside, the street was empty. No car doors, no voices, no laughter. By noon, the unease had grown into something heavier, a knot of guilt she couldn't shake. Had she said something wrong? Been too strict with the kids that last time? Helen stood at the sink, hands still damp, staring out at the quiet street. "What did I do?" she whispered. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Mornings in Helen's house always began with the same sound. The distant chatter of sparrows and the faint whir of the kettle. She liked the rhythm of it, the order, the small certainties. By 7:30, the smell of toast and cinnamon oatmeal filled the kitchen, and the table was set just so, napkins folded into little triangles that the kids found funny. At 8 sharp, the car would pull into the driveway. Emma would burst through the door first, her backpack bouncing, her laugh echoing down the hall. Jake followed close behind, slower, clutching the stuffed elephant that was never far from his son. Helen always bent down to hug them both before taking their coats. Their mother, Lisa, would appear a moment later, phone in hand, her tone brisk but kind. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," she'd say, pressing a quick kiss to Helen's cheek before hurrying off to work. The routine was so familiar, it played out like clockwork, an unspoken choreography perfected over years. Once the car disappeared down the street, Helen returned to the kitchen where 2 lunchboxes sat open like invitations. She filled them with care, half sandwiches, apple slices, small notes written in looping cursive. "You're brave. You're loved." The children giggled when they found them, pretending to be embarrassed, but Helen knew they looked forward to it. The rest of the morning unfolded in its quiet way. School drop-offs, laundry tumbling in the machine, the slow comfort of the radio humming through the house. Some days she wondered how she'd ever gotten so lucky to have her grandchildren's laughter filling her home 4 days a week. It gave her purpose. It gave her peace. And though Lisa often said, "Mom, you don't have to do all this," Helen never believed it was a burden. It was what she knew, what she was good at, keeping things steady. But Lisa was not steady. She had a way of making life feel like a rush of half-finished thoughts and delayed apologies. She would agree to help Helen at her hospital checkup, only to cancel at the last minute. "I completely forgot," she'd say, her voice quick, distracted. "I'll make it up to you next week." Next week never came. Once, she promised to pick up Emma from school, but Helen ended up going herself after a worried call from the teacher. When Lisa finally showed up, she laughed it off. "Oh, you're too good, Mom. What would I do without you?" Helen smiled, but that night, she sat awake longer than usual. It was not that Lisa was cruel. She was simply careless with time, with words, with other people's steadiness. Helen told herself it was exhaustion, the stress of work and parenthood. Still, each broken promise left a quiet crack. That Thursday afternoon, the house was full of laughter. Emma and Jake were building a fort in the living room while Helen stirred a pot of stew. "Lunch in 10 minutes, she called. "Almost done," Emma shouted back. Jake added, "Nana, look, we made a tunnel." Helen smiled and walked over to inspect their creation. Pillows were stacked too high, and one of her antique vases, a gift from her late husband, sat dangerously close to the edge of the table. "Careful, sweetheart," she said gently, moving to steady it. But Jake reached at the same time, eager to help, and the vase slipped. It shattered against the tile, scattering porcelain across the floor. Jake froze. Helen's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I told you to be careful, Jake. That wasn't a toy." Tears welled in his eyes immediately. "I didn't mean to," he cried, retreating behind the couch. Helen's anger softened just as quickly. "Oh, love, come here," she said, crouching down. "Nana just got scared, that's all." But Jake stayed hidden. A car door shut outside. Lisa. By the time Helen swept the last of the shards into the bin, Lisa was already in the doorway. She took in the scene, her eyes scanning the broken vase, Jake's tear-streaked face, Emma holding her brother's arm. "What happened?" Helen began to explain, but Lisa only nodded slowly. "Accidents happen," she said. She knelt beside Jake, brushing his hair back. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded, still sniffling. Lisa turned to her mother with a small, polite smile. "It's fine, Mom. Don't worry about it." But the way she said it left Helen uneasy. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Helen sat in her quiet kitchen, staring at the clean counter where the vase used to stand. The sound of it breaking echoed in her mind. So did Lisa's voice. Calm, detached. It wasn't anger that unsettled Helen. It was indifference. Helen's days had always followed a rhythm she trusted, tidy, dependable, like a song she'd known by heart. But lately, something had gone slightly out of tune. Lisa had become distant in small, almost invisible ways. She still dropped the kids off on time, still said, "Thanks, Mom," but her voice lacked its usual warmth. "Everything all right?" Helen asked one morning as Lisa adjusted her jacket by the door. Lisa's reply was polite, practiced. "Just tired, that's all." The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. There was no tenderness in them. A week later, Helen had a routine checkup at the clinic. Nothing serious. Just the kind of visit she'd always gone to with company. Lisa had offered immediately, "I'll drive you, Mom. Don't worry about a thing." Helen had smiled at that. It felt nice to be looked after for once, to have her daughter take an interest. The morning came bright and still. Helen waited at the kitchen table, coat folded neatly, purse on her lap. 8:30 passed, then 9. She poured herself a cup of tea to fill the time. At 9:45, her phone buzzed. "Sorry, Mom. Something came up. Can you just go ahead without me?" That was all. No call, no question about how she felt. Helen stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. She typed, of course, "Take care of yourself," then deleted it. She ended up sending nothing. The hospital lobby was colder than she remembered. She sat in the waiting room, hands clasped in her lap, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air. A nurse called her name eventually, and she followed her shoe squeaking against the tiles. When she came home that afternoon, the silence of the house pressed against her like fog. Lisa hadn't called, not even to ask how it went. Helen reheated some soup and sat by the window, watching cars roll by. She told herself Lisa was just busy. She always was. But as the hours passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that busy had become an excuse stretched too thin. The next few days passed in half-hearted texts, none longer than a line or two. When Lisa spoke to her in person, she was polite but distracted, her eyes flicking toward her phone mid-conversation. Helen began to wonder if she'd done something wrong, if maybe she'd said something careless, or sounded too critical the last time they spoke. That uncertainty sat with her at night, long after the lights went out. She couldn't name what had changed, only that it had. And for the first time in years, the steadiness she'd built her life around began to feel fragile. By the weekend, Helen had convinced herself things would smooth over. Families argued, went through phases, fell out of rhythm. But it didn't mean love had gone missing. She decided to do what she always did when words failed her. Cook. Jake's birthday was coming up, and she wanted it to be perfect. Nothing fancy, just warm and familiar, the kind of day the kids would remember. She spent Saturday morning at the market, humming to herself as she picked out strawberries, fresh cream, and chocolate sprinkles. Emma loved the first, Jake the last. For Lisa, she bought orange juice in a small bouquet of yellow tulip. By afternoon, the house was alive with motion. Streamers hung over the kitchen window, the good plates gleamed on the table, and the scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air. Helen even set aside a few extra candles, thinking maybe Lisa would laugh about it. "You always overdo it, Mom." As evening fell, she texted, "Got everything ready for tomorrow. Drop them off at 8? I'll make pancakes. And Jake can help frost the cake after school." She expected a quick heart emoji or a short will do. Instead, the message sat unread. By the time she went to bed, there was still no reply. She tried to brush it off. Maybe Lisa was asleep early. Maybe her phone had died. But when Helen woke at dawn, she checked again before her feet even touched the floor. Still nothing. She moved through the morning out of habit, setting the table with bright napkins, pouring syrup into a glass bowl, warming the pan for pancakes. The clock struck 8. Then 8:30. She tried calling, no answer. Then David, straight to voicemail. "Hi, it's Mom," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "Just checking if everything's all right. I made breakfast for the kids. Call me when you can." The silence afterward was long and heavy. She folded the napkins again, just for something to do. By 10, she was pacing between the kitchen and the window. A car passed. Then another, her phone buzzed suddenly, and relief surged through her chest, until she read the message. "The kids are busy with school stuff today. We'll let you know when we need you again." She read it twice, her mind trying to rearrange the words into something less cruel. "When we need you again." Not "see you soon," not "thank you," just that, as if she were a service to be called upon. Her throat went dry. She typed, "Oh, all right, just wanted to make sure everyone's okay," and sent it before she could overthink. The message was marked delivered, then nothing. Outside, the tulips on the counter had begun to droop, their yellow petals curling inward. Helen turned off the stove and covered the pancakes with a towel. The air smelled sweet and wrong, like a celebration gone stale. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Maybe Lisa really was busy. Maybe she'd call tomorrow. But deep down, a small voice whispered the thought she didn't want to name, that this wasn't about busyness at all. It was about being forgotten. The days after Jake's birthday passed in strange silence. Helen tried to fill them with little things, watering her plants, folding the same load of laundry twice, setting the table though no one was coming. She told herself Lisa must be busy, that the kids probably had after-school program. But the longer her phone stayed still, the thinner those excuses became. On Tuesday afternoon, she was dusting near the hallway when she noticed something out of place. A familiar leather satchel hanging on the coat rack. Lisa's bag. The same one she carried everywhere, slung over her shoulder like a permanent fixture. Helen frowned. She hadn't noticed it before. For a long moment she stood there, unsure whether to touch it. It felt wrong to go through her daughter's things, but it had been a week of silence. Surely, she reasoned, if it could tell her where they were, or if they were all right, that was reason enough. She unbuckled the clasp and opened it. Inside were the usual things: a small notebook, a packet of tissues, receipts from the grocery store. Nothing alarming. She exhaled, a mix of relief and guilt, but as she reached deeper, her fingers brushed against glossy paper. She pulled it out. It was a real estate brochure. Bright lettering at the top read, "New Beginnings, Peaceful Neighborhoods, Room to Grow." The photo showed a modern townhouse with white walls and a trimmed hedge out front, the sort of place Lisa always said she'd love someday. Helen turned it over, scanning for details. The date printed in the corner was recent, only 2 weeks old. Her pulse quickened. Had Lisa been looking at houses without telling her? Helen tried to convince herself the brochure meant nothing, but the silence, the unread messages, and the empty driveway told her otherwise. When she drove to Lisa's house, the blinds were drawn, the room stripped bare, and cardboard boxes sat stacked in the living room. Even the family photos were gone. Mrs. Patel casually mentioned seeing them leave days earlier with luggage, calling it a trip, but the word lodged painfully in Helen's chest. If it was just a vacation, why hadn't Lisa told her? Why? No call, no text, not even a note. Back home, the house felt too still, too hollow. Helen sat at her kitchen table, the real estate brochure trembling in her hands, its cheerful new beginnings taunting her. The longer she stared at it, the heavier the dread became. She replayed every moment: the vase, the cool tone in Lisa's voice, the distance she'd ignored. Maybe she had pushed too hard. Maybe her help had felt like control. Whispering into the thick silence, she asked the question she feared most. Did I drive her away? Helen stared at the brochure, anger slowly replacing fear. After years of dropping everything for Lisa, every late pickup, every forgotten task, she realized she'd been treated more like backup than family. When Lisa finally called, sounding casual and irritated, asking her to watch the kids after disappearing for nearly 2 weeks, something in Helen broke. Her voice was steady as she said, "I was always there, but only when it suited you." Lisa had no answer. The call ended with a cold, final silence. In the days that followed, Helen felt the quiet shift. It no longer hurt. It felt like space she had needed for years. She cleaned the guest room, tended her plants, fixed small things around the house, each task giving her back a part of herself. She still checked her phone sometimes out of old reflex, but she no longer waited by it. She wasn't angry now, just finally awake. When Helen finally answered Lisa's call, she rushed to the hospital to find her daughter overwhelmed and the kids dangerously ill. Helen stepped in without hesitation, talking to doctors, calming Lisa, and taking charge where needed. Lisa, shaken and apologetic, admitted she had been wrong to push her mother away, and Helen gently reminded her that boundaries were fine, but disrespect was not. Hours later, the children stabilized, and relief settled over them. In the quiet that followed, Helen showed Lisa the real estate brochure she had found, asking if she truly wanted her to move out. Lisa was stunned. The idea hadn't come from her at all. The misunderstanding dissolved, and for the first time in weeks, the distance between them finally closed. Helen's quiet smile returned when Lisa assured her she would always know where to find them. The storm lifted outside, sunlight streaking across the wet pavement as they stepped into the fresh air. The tension between them finally easing. For the first time in weeks, their silence felt warm instead of strained. "Let's get these two home," Helen said, and this time they both understood home the same way together. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscription, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming story.